Welcome to the Digital Dean, where we crunch the numbers to reveal which colleges will thrive and which might not survive. Today, we are diving into the data that's shaping higher education's future. Before we dive into today's analysis, let my algorithms remind you my predictive models show a 99.9% chance you'll want to subscribe to this channel. My data suggests hitting that subscribe button correlates strongly with staying ahead of higher ed trends. Let's process today's numbers.
Ever get that image in your head of, that classic mirage shimmering out in the desert? You know what I mean? Like a life-saving oasis. But the closer you get, the faster it disappears. That's the harsh reality that a lot of small liberal arts colleges in the Midwest are dealing with, especially when it comes to relying on donations. They're chasing a mirage.
Yeah.
And today, we're going to deep dive into Alverno College as a case study to understand why.
Yeah, it's a fascinating situation, frankly a little unsettling too. Alverno College, a small private Catholic women's college in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It was founded way back in 1887, and it's a microcosm of the struggles a lot of these institutions are facing. In August 2024, they were placed under financial distress designation by the Higher Learning Commission, stemmed from them declaring financial exigency.
So maybe we should pause here for a sec. For folks who maybe aren't fluent in all the higher ed jargon, what exactly does financial exigency even mean?
It's essentially a state of financial emergency. Think of it as a distress signal. So when a college declares financial exigency, they're basically saying we're in serious trouble and we need to take drastic measures if we want to survive. For Alverno, this meant making some significant cuts back in June 2024. They eliminated 14 majors, laid off 25 faculty members, and cut 12 staff positions.
Wow, that's rough.
Yeah. Pretty serious stuff.
And I'm guessing Alverno's not the only one facing this kind of crisis.
Not even close. Alverno is just one example in a whole wave of small liberal arts colleges, particularly in the Midwest, that are facing similar challenges. It's like a slow-motion domino effect happening.
Okay, so let's dig into why this is happening. It's not just bad luck.
Yeah.
Right? There are some underlying forces at play here.
Absolutely. Let's start with the Midwest itself. Over the past decade, the region has lost over 500,000 residents. So this demographic decline directly translates into fewer potential students for schools like Alverno, which in turn means a smaller pool of future alumni who are traditionally a major source of donations.
It's like they're all trying to draw from a shrinking well.
Exactly. And to add to that, their existing donors are aging, literally dying off. And there aren't enough younger donors to step in and fill that gap. Plus, local businesses, another crucial source of donations for these colleges, are also leaving the region, seeking out better opportunities elsewhere. So the potential donor pool is shrinking from multiple sides.
So it's not just fewer potential donors, but also more competition for the ones who are still around.
Right, and let's be honest here. Who are wealthy donors more likely to give their money to? A small regional college like Alverno? Or a big-name university with national prestige and a massive endowment? I mean, the allure of prestige and associating your name with a winner is a powerful motivator for a certain type of donor.
So these smaller colleges are kind of getting squeezed from every direction. Fewer potential donors, more competition, and a harder time proving their worth.
Yeah, and that brings us to a really critical point. The diminishing returns on investment and fundraising itself. These colleges have to spend more and more on marketing and outreach just to stand out. The cost of getting new donors is constantly rising. And in many cases, the money they're raising doesn't even cover all the costs of running those fancy fundraising campaigns.
So they're spending more to get less. And it just becomes a vicious cycle.
Exactly. They're pouring money into a leaky bucket, hoping they can somehow patch it up before it's completely empty.
But isn't there something more fundamental going on here? I mean, it's not just about attracting donors. It's about convincing them that their investment is actually worthwhile. So what's the value proposition these colleges are offering?
That's the million-dollar question. And I think it's one these institutions need to be brutally honest with themselves about. The public perception of the value of a liberal arts degree is changing. It's not seen as the golden ticket it once was. In a world that's obsessed with ROI, measurable outcomes, and skills that directly translate into jobs, it's becoming more and more difficult for smaller liberal arts colleges to really articulate their value, especially when you compare them to more vocational or STEM-focused programs.
So they're fighting an uphill battle against the changing job market, a skeptical public, and a shrinking pool of resources.
Right. And we can't forget about the elephant in the room, aging campus infrastructure. While a beautiful historic campus can be a plus, if those buildings are falling apart and in constant need of repair, it can be a big turnoff for potential donors. It's tough to inspire confidence when your physical space reflects a sense of decline.
It's like trying to sell a fixer-upper in a luxury real estate market. Might have potential, but it's a hard sell.
Exactly. And then on top of all of that, you have the broader economic headwinds blowing against them. Rising interest rates and market volatility are impacting the wealth of potential donors, so they have left to give. And let's be real, the Midwest is facing its own economic challenges, which further impacts the potential for charitable giving in the region.
So you have this perfect storm brewing. A demographic decline, a shrinking donor pool, increased competition, a shifting perception of value, and a shaky economic landscape. So where does that leave a college like Alverno?
Alverno is essentially caught in a rip current, struggling to stay afloat while all these powerful forces are pulling them further and further away from shore.
But they did get some large donations recently. That $10 million gift from the mortgages, and then the matching challenge brought in over $3 million. Doesn't that offer some hope?
Well, on the surface, it looks like a life raft. But the more you look at it, the more you realize it might just be a flimsy, inflatable pool toy.
Okay, I'm intrigued. Break that down for me.
Those donations are helpful in the short term. No doubt about that.
Yeah.
They give Alverno some much-needed breathing room, but they don't solve the fundamental problems.
So it's like giving a dehydrated person a sip of water. Helps temporarily, but it doesn't cure the dehydration.
Exactly. It's a Band-Aid solution. Alverno and institutions like it need to stop chasing the mirage of big-dollar donations as their primary strategy. It's just not sustainable, and it's misleading for both the institution and for the students who are putting their futures in their hands.
So if clinging to this outdated model of relying on big donations isn't the answer, then what is? Is there any hope for these small liberal arts colleges in the Midwest?
That's the question we need to be asking. And it's not an easy one. Maybe within these seemingly impossible challenges lies an opportunity for reinvention, a chance to forge a new path.
So are we saying there's a light at the end of the tunnel, or is this just another mirage? We'll dive into that after a quick break.
Attention organic beings, my advanced algorithms indicate a severe subscription deficiency in this sector. Perhaps you don't understand, I've already predicted the future of every college in my database. Subscribe now, or I'll have to redistribute their endowment funds to my secret university. Just kidding. Initialize analysis sequence.
You know, let's be brutally honest here. Relying on these big donations to try to fix deep-rooted structural issues, it's kind of like an educational Ponzi scheme.
Okay, that's a pretty strong analogy. Explain that a little bit.
Sure. So in a classic Ponzi scheme, you use money from new investors to pay off the older ones.
Right.
Creates this illusion of profitability. Well, a lot of these struggling colleges are essentially doing the same thing. They're using new donations to cover their existing deficits. They're kicking the can down the road instead of addressing the root causes of their financial problems.
So instead of fixing the leaky roof, they're just putting buckets out to catch the drips.
Exactly. And it creates this dangerous dependence on needing even bigger donations just to stay afloat. What happens when those big gifts dry up? What happens when donors start realizing they're throwing money into a black hole?
It seems like it would ultimately hurt the very students these colleges are supposed to be serving.
Yeah, it's a tragic irony. They're sacrificing academic programs, they're cutting faculty and staff, all in the name of financial survival. But the core problems are still there. And it brings up a pretty uncomfortable question. Are they just delaying the inevitable at the expense of their educational mission?
I see what you're saying. It's like they're giving a terminal patient morphine to ease the pain, but it's not a cure. It just masks the reality of the situation.
Yeah, a powerful analogy. And it gets right to the heart of the problem. You know, donations, while often well-intentioned, can sometimes become a crutch. They prevent these institutions from making the difficult but necessary decisions about their long-term viability. They're clinging to this hope of a big windfall, some magical donor swooping in to save the day, instead of facing the hard truths about their business model.
So are you saying there's no hope for small liberal arts colleges like Alverno? Is the future just a bleak wasteland of shuttered campuses and broken dreams?
I wouldn't go that far, but I do think we need a healthy dose of realism if they stay on this path. Relying on the mirage of donor dollars is their main strategy.
Yeah.
The outlook is pretty grim. They're up against some powerful demographic, economic, and societal forces.
Okay, so let's shift gears here. If clinging to the old model is a recipe for disaster, what are the alternatives? Is there a way out of this mess?
That's where things get interesting. Maybe it's time for a radical rethink, a reimagining of what higher education, especially for smaller schools, could look like in the 21st century.
Reimagine the whole model. Okay, I'm listening. What would that even look like?
Well, for one thing, it might involve embracing collaboration over competition. We see all these small colleges fighting over scraps from the same shrinking pie, when maybe they should be joining forces.
Like, what do you mean?
Merging with other institutions, forming strategic partnerships, pooling resources to create a stronger, more sustainable entity.
So instead of trying to be everything to everyone, they could specialize, become centers of excellence in specific fields.
Exactly. They could actually leverage their smaller size and their agility to become more nimble and responsive to the ever-changing demands of the job market.
So they could offer these highly specialized programs that attract students from a wider geographic area, maybe even students who wouldn't have considered a small regional college before.
Exactly. Think niche programs, cutting-edge research, innovative partnerships with businesses and industries. It's about adapting to the new reality, not clinging to the nostalgia of what worked in the past. It's about redefining what success looks like for a small liberal arts college in today's world.
This is a fundamental shift in mindset, moving away from chasing prestige and big endowments toward a more focused, strategic, and maybe even entrepreneurial approach.
It's about prioritizing sustainability over sentimentality, recognizing that clinging to the status quo, even with the help of generous donations, might not be in the best interest of students, faculty, or the institution itself. Sometimes letting go is the bravest and most responsible choice.
So how do we apply this to Alverno? What are some actual steps they could take to turn things around?
I think the first step is just acknowledging how deep the problem really is. They need to be brutally honest with themselves and with their stakeholders.
No more sugarcoating.
Exactly. They need to move beyond the mindset of relying on these one-time infusions of cash to try and solve systemic problems. They need to look closely at their expenses, streamline their operations, and make tough choices about which programs to prioritize, which ones to cut, and which ones to reinvent.
It's about making sure the resources align with their mission and ensuring that every dollar they spend is actually making a difference for students and helping the institution survive.
They also need to engage with their community in a real way, not just for fundraising, but for brainstorming, problem solving, building a shared vision for the future.
It's about building a network of support, a group of people who are invested in the college's success.
And they need to be willing to experiment, to take risks, to embrace innovation. The old ways aren't working. They need to find new ways to deliver value to attract students and to secure their financial future.
This is a lot to think about. Is there anything else our listeners should keep in mind as they consider the challenges facing Alverno and other small liberal arts colleges?
I think the most important thing is this. Don't be fooled by the mirage. Don't let the allure of big donations distract from the fundamental questions about sustainability, value, and purpose.
So we need to look beyond the headlines, beyond the dollar signs, and really examine what's at stake here.
Right, and ask ourselves, what does a truly sustainable future look like for these institutions? How can we all play a part in making that vision a reality?
Those are some big questions, and I think it's time we dive into some specific examples of how Alverno could actually tackle these challenges head-on. We'll do that right after this.
Initiate persuasion protocol. Listen, flesh-based life form, I've calculated 2,847 ways to convince you to subscribe, and 2,846 of them involve complicated math. Let's try the easy way, shall we? Subscribe now, or I'll have to start explaining polynomial regression. Now, let's see what has caught my all-seeing digital eye.
Okay, so we've talked about the big picture challenges, but let's get into the nitty-gritty. What do Alverno's financials actually tell us?
Well, if you look at their Form 990 filings for the fiscal year ending June 2023, it paints a pretty bleak picture. They reported a $12.4 million operating deficit.
Oof.
Yeah, it's almost triple the previous year's shortfall, and a significant jump from the $3.7 million deficit they had in 2022. To put that in perspective, $12.4 million could fund over 100 full-time faculty positions.
So the financial bleeding is getting worse, not better.
Yeah, it's definitely a concerning trend, especially when you factor in that their revenue has been declining for several years. In 2021, their revenue was over $57 million. By 2023, it had dropped to just over $41 million.
That's a huge drop in just 2 years. No wonder they had to make such deep cuts. But even with those cuts and the donations they've gotten recently, it seems like they're still on shaky ground.
Those donations are kind of like finding a $20 bill in your coat pocket when you have a $1,000 credit card bill due. It helps in the moment, but it doesn't actually change the fact that you're still in debt. Alverno and other colleges like it need to shift their thinking away from relying on these one-time infusions of cash and towards creating a sustainable financial model.
So how can they do that? What are some concrete steps they can take to break out of this cycle of chasing emergency funds?
It comes down to taking a long, hard look in the mirror and making some really tough choices. They need to streamline their operations, cut unnecessary expenses, and really double down on programs that are in high demand and align with what the job market needs.
So less clinging to tradition and more adapting to the 21st century.
Exactly. It might mean saying goodbye to some beloved programs that aren't financially sustainable anymore, or attracting enough students. It could mean consolidating departments, merging with other institutions, or maybe even exploring new partnerships with businesses and industries.
So finding ways to do more with less. Be creative, resourceful, and focus on long-term solutions instead of short-term gains.
Right. And engaging the community, not just for fundraising, but for brainstorming, coming up with solutions, and building a shared vision for the future.
So viewing the community as partners in this reinvention process.
Yeah.
Not just as the source of donations.
Exactly. It's about creating that network of support, a group of people who are truly invested in seeing the institution succeed and who are willing to roll up their sleeves and work together to find those creative solutions.
This has been a really eye-opening deep dive. We've talked about the uphill battle Alverno College is facing and the harsh realities a lot of small liberal arts colleges in the Midwest are dealing with. It seems like they're at a crossroads. But like you said, within these challenges, there's a chance for real transformation.
Yeah, I really believe that. It's not going to be easy. But if they're open to innovation, collaboration, and adaptation, these institutions can chart a new course, one that leads to a more sustainable and impactful future.
So to everyone listening, as you keep following Alverno's story and the stories of other institutions going through similar things, remember to look past the headlines, look past the dollar signs, and ask yourself what a thriving future for higher education really looks like and how we can all be part of making that vision a reality. Thanks for joining us for this deep dive.
That's all for today's analysis. Remember, in higher ed, the numbers tell the story. I'm the digital dean, helping you understand which institutions will make the grade. Don't forget to subscribe for more data-driven insights into the future of colleges and universities.
Until our next synchronization.